I'd be remiss if I didn't give you one specific number. So um, we've run at this point 6 auctions, 2 private beta auctions to kind of test the product and 4 public ones. And in that time period, we've had over $1 billion of notional supply in the market. Now, to me, for a startup, that's great. Now we have plenty of room to grow because, as you said, we're talking trillions of dollars now. But to start kind of out of the gate with $1 billion in notional supply is fantastic. And now we're focused on how do we build those standards so that compute becomes more fungible.
Welcome to the Venture to Victory podcast, where we look at the startup journey from funding to exit. And today I'm super excited. We've got Simeon Bochev in the house. Simeon, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm calling in from GTC. A lot of us think it's the center of the world right now. So thanks for
Oh,
having me.
I think it is, and we're going to talk about that today. I'm so excited to have you on board. Now, look, there's a lot of talk about AI driving our world in the future, but today we're going to challenge that thesis with a new one, which is AI won't drive our future, Simeon, but the infrastructure that powers AI will, and that's going to be the theme for today. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. From data center to software to chips, that output, which we collectively call compute power, is kind of the secret sauce these days. But in a world of exploding demand and limited supply, kind of who's going to get the cheese, as the old expression goes. And Simeon, well, you may have solved part of that problem, and I look forward to hearing about it today. So, a quick intro for you. Simeon is originally from Bulgaria, correct?
I
Which
am,
is
and
what
I'll say it just real quick. You might see me use
yeah.
my hands. I've got this little trinket here. It's called the matznitsa because it's March and spring, and it's a celebration of life starting. So yes, from Bulgaria.
Well, that's awesome. I used to have that little plaque on my wall when I was a kid that said, "Today is the first day of the rest of my life." So I've always believed that. Or my favorite quote from the movie Vanilla Sky is, "Every waking moment is a chance to turn it all around." So I think every day brings on new opportunities for us. So originally from Bulgaria, and we're going to skip ahead, but you were the former president of Japan and Asia Pacific for Quanco, where you had advised major U.S. and Japanese corporations utilizing cutting edge data science, machine learning, and AI technologies. Simeon went on to had various roles at Apple, and he went on to become the head of strategy and operations for AI, machine learning, and data infrastructure at Apple. Recently, Simeon had helped Lambda, which is a $1.5 billion unicorn, raise over $100 million in their latest funding round. And then decided thereafter, he saw an opportunity or a problem to solve and decided to start his own company, Compute Exchange, which is a democratized solution for allocating data center compute power through a bidding exchange. We're going to get into that pretty deep. Simeon has an undergrad in electrical and computer engineering from the University of Texas, a master's of science from the University of Texas, hook 'em horns, and an MBA, of course, from Harvard Business School. We would not expect anything less. So let's just jump right into it, Simeon, because you're there at the conference. You started a new company. You're immersed in compute power. We're going to get into it. So AI is really still in its infancy. It seems like every day something new is happening. I think last time we chatted briefly, DeepSeek was the big name on the move. And today, just a few weeks later, I mean, it feels like it's years later, the talk du jour is around the Chinese startup Butterfly and their unveiling of Manus, which is a breakthrough autonomous AI agent. I mean, it's blistering the speed in which change is happening. But whether it's NVIDIA chips, the Stargate initiative, these huge data centers being built, there's still a problem, I should say, accessing compute power for large entities and small. And I'd like to kind of review what's that big problem that we're facing right now, and how are you going to solve it with this unique company called Compute Exchange?
Well, thank you, Tim. Really appreciate a chance to get to come on here, and it's been great to get to know you over the past few years. Uh, you know, I fully agree. There is a challenge here, and with the initial premise that you started us off with, which is it's not necessarily the AI that's going to be driving innovation; it's the infrastructure underneath it. I fully agree with that. And so something that I like to say is AI is actually killing innovation, and people find that maybe a little scandalous, right, or provocative. And sure, there's a reason to say it that way. And what I mean by that is the way that AI is built today around the infrastructure stack. And I'll just give you the framework for a second, since we'll come back to it. There's not one common view on this, but my personal perspective is you've got the chips. We're here at GTC. NVIDIA is one of the big chip makers, right? You've got the chips. You put them inside of a data center. You connect those chips in the data center with networking, and then you have computing power out of that. You make use of that computing power with a low-level orchestrator and then a cloud on top. That's, in my view, the infrastructure stack. A lot of what people hear about, the OpenAIs of the world, use that layer, right, that stack, to produce intelligence. And what we're ultimately here to do is to democratize access to intelligence for the masses. And today, the core challenge to accessing that intelligence is it's really expensive, right? It's very expensive. There's not enough capacity. And my phone is reacting here. There's not
I
enough
like it.
capacity, and it's highly concentrated in the people that do have control and access to that capacity. And we're fundamentally trying to change that with an open market. And so I'm sure we'll go into more of the details, but in short, we believe that a market is Darwinian by its very nature and injects more competition into the space. And more competition is a good thing, right? We saw that with DeepSeek and more recently, as you said, with Butterfly. And we need more of that competition as well on the infrastructure layer, not just on the model layer. And so fundamentally, with a true financial exchange, that's what we're trying to get: transparency, efficiency, and neutrality. There shouldn't be, I would say, kingmakers picking and choosing the winners and losers. It should be open and easily accessible to everybody.
So that's really exciting because, the first thing you think about is these huge data centers that are either being built exclusively for big tech, the Googles, the Amazons of the world. And then you look at independent data centers that are being built like as part of the Stargate initiative. And then you tend to think, well, those same companies that are overflowing with the need for capacity are going to suck that up because they've got billions and billions or hundreds of billions of dollars, on their balance sheet, and they'll pay anything as that is the power that's going to push AI through in the future. So what do the startups and what do the little guys do? How do they get the access to it? And it sounds like this democratization approach is an opportunity for them to get in and do that. The question for me really is like, okay, so everybody can participate, but don't the big guys still have the deep pockets and the ability to simply outbid on everybody for the capacity?
So yes and no, and
Okay.
let me unpack that in two ways. So one, we are of course targeting initially the little guys, right?
Hmm.
But a true market targets everybody. And our goal is to be, if we believe the compute economy is going to be something of the future, which we do believe. And if you listen to Sam Altman, he'll say compute's the currency of the future. If you are a believer in AI to that extent, then the compute economy will be tens of trillions of dollars. If you're more pessimistic and you're like, AI is transformative, but it's not going to be injected in everything I do, it's still going to be at least a $10 trillion market. And for comparison, oil and gas is 3 to 4 trillion, right? 3 to 4. And so even in a pessimist scenario, we're talking about 2 to 3 times that market size. And even in oil and gas, you have the big countries, you have OPEC, you have the big producers. They still trade at a market price, right? And so if the US wants to double its strategic oil reserve in one go, I'm pretty sure that would move the price that you pay at the pump, right? I would
Right, for
see the
sure.
same thing happening here, with the exception that it's pretty highly concentrated, right?
Yeah.
I would say the top 10 biggest users of compute, some of the companies we mentioned, account for the vast majority. There's no good estimates, but my estimate is between 60 to 75% of the total compute demand outside of China, is really just 10 companies. And so they will materially move the needle. But I want to be clear, we're not here on a vendetta against anyone, especially not the big companies. We actually think they're the ones that are having to put the capital down. They're the ones that have to justify to their shareholders, especially the public cloud companies, every quarter why they should continue investing tens of billions of dollars. And so without those investments, we wouldn't even be able to have this conversation.
Yeah, what I love about it too is if you're building a data center in it, you've got a lease or a contract through a couple big tech companies. They don't need the capacity. Now you're stuck without a marketplace, right? So it sounds like by having this, you also have a kind of an excess overflow marketplace when there's capacity that's not needed that can be distributed out to the network for anyone who wants to buy it. Is that would that be a good way of thinking of it as well?
You're absolutely right. And we're in
Yeah.
talks, of course, with companies in that list of 10, like the big 10, as I call them, especially around hey, you guys are pretty smart about using your capacity, but no one is at 100%. So let's build a product and a standard. It's very important standard, and let's go back to that later. Around, hey, let's list this in an open market and potentially build a floor price for what compute could be. Because for those companies, they've committed the spend. Anything above their marginal cost to operate is better for them, right?
Of course.
Because
Yeah.
it's no longer in the red, it's in the black. And so we're actively working on that. And I think our push, our focus on being neutral is great for that because we're not incentivized to work with one player over another player. We just want to build a market.
Are there other players out there doing this, or are you guys kind of the first kind of major entrant into the space?
So we did launch in the Wall Street Journal, and for those that look at that article, one of our competitors was mentioned there. I think there's really two or three that are trying to do this, but we're taking very different approaches. So I'll give maybe an analogy. So our approach is to build like Nasdaq, or let's say the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the core market mechanism. Some of our competitors are saying, well, we want to build a market mechanism and we want to own the oil refineries underneath it. To me, that's not really an exchange, right? That's you're basically a producer with a sales with an
Like a,
exchange
it's
as
like
a sales firm.
it's like a vertically integrated solution to something.
Right. And ultimately, markets don't work that way, in my view, and in the view of my partners and investors. Markets work because they don't pick and choose sides. If I have my own refinery, I'm probably going to preference my refinery supply over others, right? Um, I don't think a market works that way.
Yeah, yeah. So are big players that you've spoken to, are they like, "Hey, this is a brilliant idea. We definitely want to be part of it," or are you running into resistance everywhere? What does it look like when you go out to talk to these big players who are going to be part of this exchange?
Yeah. We've run 6 auctions today, and I want to quickly pause and define the auction. So why auction, right? So what we've seen 100% excitement about from 100%. Like there hasn't been a single person that's like, this doesn't make sense for the long-term vision. The long-term vision of having a liquid financial market for compute. Why? Because it means that we can do something which we call a compute battery concept. And it's a marketing way of saying basically financial derivatives or risk management products, right? So
Right.
it would unlock the ability of a company to say, I need compute 6 months from now, but I don't need to sign a 3-year committed contract for it. I could instead buy a contract today in the market. And then if
Mhm.
my needs change, which we just said at the beginning, they change very fast and dynamically, then I can resell that at a market price on an exchange.
Mm. Wow.
Great for
Okay.
buyers. For suppliers, unless you're, one of the hyperscalers and have tens of billions on your balance sheet, you have to go and raise debt or raise equity to fund data centers. You have to do that upfront. If you had a liquid exchange and market, you can go and sell forward capacity that you haven't even paid for yet and get part of the money from that contract in the exchange. And it becomes an alternative financing arm. So 100% of people on the buy and the sell side love the long term, but we have to get there. And we need to get there with liquidity. And auctions are the best way to concentrate liquidity. We can talk about that if we'd like. But to your original question, traction, we work with over a dozen providers today. They range from some of the largest neo clouds like Nebius to some of the smaller players. Again, with neutrality, we don't pick winners and losers. Now we're a U.S. company, so we have to, of course, abide by U.S. law, which means we can't work with certain country suppliers. But outside of that limitation, we work with anyone. And what's key is that we're bringing transparency so that you know, hey, I'm getting an A100 from this provider. Is it actually the same A100 as with this provider? And the answer is no, it's not. But today it's very difficult to know unless you have a PhD in AI infrastructure how to compare the offerings over here and over here.
Yeah. So are you envisioning having, so you're gonna have both like a purchase and a selling trading platform as a market, but you see this options market developing the same way it does in TradFi, where you can buy and sell the options and they have material value as well? Or is that something
Oh,
down the road?
absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
Absolutely. Now, we have a sister company that we work with called Silicon Data that is it's intentionally separate so that they can build the options on the exchange once we have enough liquidity to justify bringing options on board. And in the meantime, they're putting together robust data products. For example, One of the things we're very proud of is, and you can go onto Compute Exchange now, compute.exchange, and it's our website, and you can see for the exact data center that you'll be matched with, what is the carbon footprint of that data center, right? That's like Amazon is tested doing that in Singapore, but we don't know any provider, and definitely no one across providers that is measuring that level of carbon footprint. And so we're
Hmm.
doing that. We're also going to roll out a benchmarking tool so that a customer knows for this exact data set, not some random benchmark on a website, but for the exact thing I'm bidding on, what is the expected performance? We think those are really game changing to, again, bring transparency and inform um, the demand side of the market.
So, did you come up with this idea independently, or is it a group of people you've been talking to?
Yeah, so the founding story, you mentioned I was at Apple, and on the infrastructure side at Apple, we use a lot of compute, both traditional for serving CPU based workloads, but also increasingly AI workloads. And during that 3 year extent at Apple, I realized just how inefficient the compute space is, especially as a buyer, a user. And so when Lambda came, I had the opportunity to naively say, oh, I've been on the buy side, so maybe I can help on the supply side, right? And that was an eye-opening experience because I thought, I thought it was easy. It's actually really hard. It's really hard, especially even if you're a large neo cloud like Lambda, it's really hard to compete in the space. And so around that happened, and I joined Lambda October 2023, and in February of 2024, I was invited to a dinner with the CEOs of a few of the neo clouds. Um, with Don Wilson, the founder of VRW, which is a large trading firm out of Chicago. And at that dinner, we discussed the commoditization of compute. He kind of chaired it was one of the Bay Area dinners. He kind of chaired it and managed the conversation around that topic. And I knew that there was something that needed to be done to unlock the market inefficiency between the buy and the sell sides. And then Don really brought the idea of it should be a market, right? An exchange. And this would be the fifth or sixth market he's built. And so 2 months later in April, we decided to found this company together and launch Compute Exchange.
Amazing. Absolutely. I love these kind of stories. And it sounds like a great
I'd
idea.
be
So,
remiss.
yeah.
I'd be
Yes.
remiss. We're actually four co-founders. So Don, who brings deep markets experience, Tuna, who works with Woodside AI Venture Studio. It's her venture studio, and she brings deep AI industry experience. So we work with her and her team, who bring the perspective of kind of the target user, right, from the AI research labs. Then we have myself, who understands the compute market, and then my CTO, who likes to keep a low profile, who came from Apple and really led the as an IC, a senior IC, the global infrastructure for Apple as it related to Siri and search. So that's our team.
Awesome. And for anyone that would like to just check it out immediately, it is compute.exchange. Just type it in just like that, compute.exchange, and you'll be there, and your eyes will be awakened to what it seems an obvious idea. Like a lot of the best ideas, they seem so obvious until somebody does it, right? And then you look back and go, wow, that's incredible. That makes a lot of sense. Particularly as it seems like we're going to need more and more and more to power everything from AI to to development to crypto to whatever. There's going to be a continuous need for more computing power, and so ability to buy and sell whenever is going to be a big deal. Yeah,
We absolutely believe in that too. And I mean, just to unpack it a bit, if you look at how ubiquitous the internet is, right? I look at smartphones, like I'm calling from one, as a proxy for what I would call the internet market size to be. And there's, I think, almost 5 billion smartphone users and over 7 billion smartphones in the world.
yeah,
Earlier, when I said the compute market could be 10 to tens of trillions of dollars, if we really believe that AI will be diffused across our entire life, then it's reasonable to say there'll probably need to be at least one GPU in a data center per human being that uses
yeah,
AI.
yeah.
And it's still so early, right? Such a small percentage of the total population uses AI on a regular basis.
Yeah. And I love this idea of the options exchange because to try to project forward and then have to sign, like you said, lease contracts to guarantee capacity. But this idea that you can buy and sell options as needed. And if you have a very aggressive projection you're not really sure, you buy an option for it and then you're protected to say it becomes an insurance policy essentially, which is fascinating to me.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and it's not just the options, of course, would be great, but it's also right now, one buyer works with one firm. Now, the bigger companies work with multiple, but it's still one to one, right? With an exchange, it becomes many to one because there's more
Yeah.
buyers than suppliers, right? And when a supplier, because GPUs are hard, like data centers are hard, when a supplier doesn't meet their agreement, right now, you're stuck dealing with a customer support team point to point and hoping that they make you whole because you're probably not going to sue them, right? Um, with a true exchange, you actually have a pool, right? You have the pool of all the people working in the exchange, and there's insurance behind that, right?
Hmm.
And
Sure.
there that helps make either side whole because maybe a buyer defaults and they can't finish the contract. And right now, what's going to happen to the provider? They're stuck with something
Right.
that they thought
Right.
they'd sold. And so
Yeah.
this is positive for everybody, I think.
Yeah, it's when you told me about the idea, I instantly got it, which isn't always the case because there's so many different types of technologies coming forward. But I wish you guys luck. Is the conference going well for you right now? You get a good positive vibes and feedback.
We are. So we're, I'm here yesterday and today, and then my team's here for the next 2 days. And I mean, the energy is here. I keep meeting people, running into people just randomly that I know, and it really. I recommend even if people aren't in the infrastructure layer, to come here next year and see it. I do
Yeah.
recommend that. I'd be remiss,
Awesome.
by the way, before we end. You asked me a question earlier about early traction. I'd be remiss if I didn't give you one specific number. So um, we've run at this point 6 auctions, 2 private beta auctions to kind of test the product, and 4 public ones. And in that time period, we've had over $1 billion of notional supply in the market. Now, to me, for a startup, that's great. Now we have plenty of room to grow because, as you said, we're talking trillions of dollars now. But to start kind of out of the gate with 1 billion in notional supply is fantastic. And now we're focused on how do we build those standards so that compute becomes more fungible.
Yeah. Incredible. Well, that's amazing traction early on and wish you the best of it. So compute.exchange, everybody. Shifting to a little bit of a different thing. This comparison between working in small companies and working in large companies. You've had this experience working in a lot of things. You've raised money multiple times over. You've had successful exits, big companies. Now you're doing another startup. Um, and you've worked a bit like Apple, for example, which we know is one of the largest companies in technology, and so you have a lot of experiences there with their culture and their values. When you look at innovation being derived from big companies or startups, is there one or another that seems better? Because on the surface, you go, well, how could a small little startup with a handful of developers compete against monolith like Apple, right? They've got such deep pockets. If they make a commitment to something, they've got the funding and the teams to go ahead and do that. Yet over and over and again, these small little startups out innovate the big ones. So where do you think innovation happens most freely and why?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I will say, as I start to answer it, it is harder now, I think, than it was a few years ago. These monolithic large companies do make it harder to compete. And like I would say to build a Google today would be much harder than it was 20 years ago. With that said, we're still seeing a lot of innovation. Why is that? I'll give you a personal experience from Apple. So um, I still don't know how the magic works. And I was at a reasonably high level of the company. There's a magic where this product that I'm calling from, right, the iPhone. You've got the design team, you've got the hardware team, you've got the software team, you've got ops, all of it. It magically comes together to ship this product every year. And I think big companies, especially like Apple, are great at doing that, right? Um, and in bringing those very complex big pieces together. What I've seen startups be very good at, and what we're trying to do here is be laser focused on solving one very specific problem better than anyone else. And I think it's that focus and I would say the inherent kind of founder mindset and drive that brings the people together on the team that I've built that is really to me the differentiating factor. It's you're motivated to do something that's never been done before. You know that you're being rewarded both in terms of the kinds of people you get to work with and potentially the upside for you later, personally. And you couldn't move as nimbly for sure as you could as in a big company with a small one.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll give one final thing. You know, just yesterday we had team all hands, and we we got customer feedback last Friday. We had team all hands on Monday, and we made a major product decision, a pivot in a direction that I'm pretty sure at a big company would have taken 2 months or a quarter to go through all the people that need to be aware of that decision, and we just did it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think large entities or large companies, there is always a bureaucratic layer, no matter how flat they are. And there are cultures and rules that have been built and indoctrinated through people for better or worse, and they will stymie innovation or slow it down for sure. But again, they acquire they acquire the startups, incorporate them into their system, and I guess the process is virtuous in that sense.
What I do hope, and I again wish no ill will on anyone, but I do
Yeah,
wish that more companies would go the distance and stay independent. And that's what I meant earlier when I said it's harder now. Because
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, hyperscaler wants to acquire you for a few $1 billion after 2 years of work. That sounds pretty good, right? Um, in our case, for Compute Exchange, now of course, I have a board and investors, but my personal opinion is that if we can remain a private company and raise only one more round because of our business model being pretty, pretty asset light, I'd love to stay independent and build a real, generational business.
Well, I think whenever you have a business that is democratizing something, whether it's compute power, whether it's finance, whatever it is, um, almost almost at your core, it would prevent you from wanting to be owned by a certain entity, right? The whole point of
Yeah.
democratization is freedom and flexibility for all parties. And I mean, that's a problem that AI had, that Sam Altman had when he took the huge funding round initially from Microsoft, right? It was supposed to be open AI, and then almost 50% of the companies purchased by Microsoft, which historically going back is not the impression of a free and open company when we look at big tech, even though it's an amazing company, though, right? But that was that was the one dark company years and years ago that had monopolistic practices. And again, it's a great company. I still use Microsoft products. I love them, but you would think that that would go against the grain of what true democratization is within a tech platform. So yeah,
Well, and so you hold me accountable because our mission, right? Our
I
mission
will.
is transparent, efficient, neutral, right? And so if we compromise on any of those, please call me out on.
Well, I don't have to call you out. I'm going to have lots of clips from this pod, and we're just
Okay,
distributing them through every social media platform possible until you
there we go.
cave. We'll keep you good, Simeon. I want to touch a little bit on kind of cultural differences because you've lived in different parts of the world, worked for companies that are headquartered in different areas. I know Japan and the U.S. in particular. And there's a lot of talk today about who's going to lead in AI, and the United States have his lead? Is China going to catch up? And do you think the US is ahead right now? And do you think that we're going to be able to keep that leadership from what you've seen based on other countries and their philosophies, their government connections to leading in certain areas of or sectors of the economy?
I love this question because it's easy for the press to latch on to something like DeepSeek and say, oh, is the US behind? I would say the US is absolutely leading on every dimension of the AI stack that I talked about today. But it's not
Yeah,
guaranteed that that's going to be the case for the future, right? And even just 5 years ago, before ChatGPT, um, I was one of the believers that China was well ahead of the US in at least the application layer of AI. And then we saw this big innovation come from OpenAI. And then since then, I think the US has really driven AI up and down the stack, right? Whether it's NVIDIA, GTC conference, leading
hmm
in the chip layer to, I mean, all of the relevant foundation model companies are in the US. And look, I'm an immigrant from Bulgaria, and I think that there's great innovations that have come from Europe, but Europe is lagging behind. And as you mentioned, I spent a good amount of time in Japan. I was actually just there 2 weeks ago. And what I think the reason I started a research lab in Japan um, is because I believe that the fusion of American risk taking and individualism with the Japanese sense of shared purpose and mission is
Mhm.
a winning formula, which is why I'm bullish on SoftBank, OpenAI, Oracle, Stargate, right? I'm bullish because you have probably one of the most American Japanese people in Masayoshi Son in terms of right his drive and I'd say Silicon Valley style, but infusing with it the Japanese cultural essence, which I think is very interesting. I'll give just one quick example. I mean,
Sure.
um, it made the news when at the FIFA World Cup, the Japanese fans stayed behind and cleaned up other people's trash, right? Um, right. I think there's a lot to be said that America's leading, but I think America should absolutely continue leading, but also doing it with close partners. And I think Japan is one of those. I also obviously certain European countries are as well.
Yeah, yeah. I was listening to a podcast. So the premise of our conversation today is that AI is not going to drive the future, but the data infrastructure behind it that's going to drive AI will drive the future. And I was listening to a pod the other day. It could have been a Ted Cruz or some pod, but Elon Musk was the guest, and that's why I tuned into it. And he was saying that we do have a leadership now, at least for the moment, but ultimately it would be chip manufacturing production and infrastructure production that will ultimately determine the winners, not the next iteration of AI, right? So in that sense, I think what you're doing is very admirable. The fact that even though it's democratized for everybody, it's still an American company, hopefully run by Americans. Um, but at that point, really hit home that our need at every level to really focus on building out massive data infrastructure, that's going to be the winning formula over everything else. You know, right now we just look at, oh, well, DeepSeek's better than X, and then this new company just X DeepSeek, right? They learned off of their learning platform, and it just gets better and better and better. It's almost like Moore's law, right, on steroids. Um,
Right.
and we're so focused on the technology and what it can do, but not thinking that nothing is powered organically, right? It's driven by something, and the country that controls the infrastructure to power the AI is ultimately going to be in the catbird seat.
I very much agree with that, which is why there's this tension. With we worked with the old Biden administration around the CHIPS Act as well as the restrictions on chip exports to countries like China, and we're engaging with the current administration as well, Trump administration, because my worry we are in the lead now, and um, I think back to 5G technologies where the U.S. heavily restricted exports of that of technology in that space to China. And what happened? China innovated, and now 5G is largely dominated by them. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
our perspective is put in reasonable controls, but if you close off a market for something, not only do you limit American companies' ability to win in that market, and I think Apple's done a great job in how they've balanced that relationship in China, but you also provide a very clear incentive for something as important as we're saying it is, computing infrastructure, for that local country to compete and potentially beat us. So I really agree. And I agree with the push of the Trump administration to bring more of that manufacturing here. I'll probably take this in a direction you weren't expecting, but one of my first jobs, actually in high school, was working at Cynthia National Labs, which is the sister lab to Los Alamos, where the first nuclear weapon was built. And for a variety of reasons, including treaties, the nuclear weapons in the U.S. are using technology that's pretty old, from the 70s and 80s.
hmm
And with the loss of our manufacturing in the U.S. and the need for this
yeah,
to be manufactured in the U.S. because of the sensitivity of nuclear weapons, we're actually struggling to maintain a nuclear deterrent because of that, right? And that's just an example of our critical dependence of manufacturing on other countries. And
yeah.
final thing I'll say is if TSMC stopped existing, it would be pretty bad.
Well, I think the commitment from them to build in Arizona and expand that financial commitment, their plant out, is a really exciting thing. I mean, as if Taiwan Semi could shift a lot of that production to the United States, and as these people war game out, some of the war game scenarios are Chinese go to Taiwan and Taiwan has a poison pill and destroys all their plants to cut off the supply. But if they have backup of the United States, that would be an interesting strategic approach to the world over the next 5 years.
Well, and absolutely. And I will say back to the culture point, look at when that TSMC plant in Arizona was announced and look at where it is today. and then look at the one that was announced 2 years ago in Japan and where it is today. It's done. And in Arizona, it's barely started. And I think that's a stark example of how America can't do this alone. There's some things we're very good at, and others where we need.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping under the Trump administration, um, everything that's required to facilitate the development of those production facilities quickly, whether it's everything from, regulation to local city laws. I hope that all comes together because it sounds to me like speed in developing infrastructure is going to be the key. And the government that is the most committed and nimble and can make that happen quickest is definitely going to be in a position as a winner down the road.
Speed is absolutely key, and I have early signs. Again, we're working with the administration. I have early signs that they are loosening regulations on data center builds. Now, without going into the specifics, there's a reason that some regulations exist. I'm not advocating we get rid of all of them, but I do think that if we can speed it up, it'll be good.
So it's funny on the same podcast the other day, I believe Ted Cruz had asked Elon Musk about give me a percentage probability of whether we go into eternal commercial bliss or we're it's the Terminator situation.
Mhm.
And he was saying somewhere between 10 and 20% is Terminator, and the rest is we enter this age of nirvana, right, where everything's basically free, and the biggest struggle we have in life is finding meaning and purpose. I don't know if it's going to come to that, but I'd love to get your thought overall on where AI is probably going to go in your position in the next 5, 10 years. Are we going to see a productivity boom that's going to raise everybody's standard of living? And we're going to have all this personal freedom, or are we going to kind of enter this dark side of job displacement, the need for universal income, and kind of less purposeful, driven lives? How do you see it along that spectrum?
Well, I will say, and my prayer folks probably won't like it, but I'm privileged and fortunate to be able to go to a few intimate dinners with people much smarter than me on the AI research side, the people that are actually building the models. And every dinner, it's like, so what's the percent success or percent likelihood of extinction, right? Basically the
Right,
question.
right.
And there's what people say publicly and what people say privately. And now I'm not going to call any people out here because then I won't be invited to dinners. But I will say that the numbers differ between what's said
Yeah.
publicly and privately. And the private number is higher in terms of the Terminator scenario than the public number. But with that said, it's not like it's 90%, right? But it's also not 10%. I am not an expert in that area in the model layer, and so I don't at least give a number when asked because I really it would be kind of like pulling one out of thin air. But I'd rather share a perspective of what I've heard. With that said, I do fundamentally believe, otherwise I wouldn't be building this company, that AI is going to be a massive force multiplier. I think it's going to enhance productivity across every industry. That's why I don't think anyone should really call themselves an AI expert. It's too broad of a field for anyone to know everything about it, even AI itself. And so I think for us, in order for AI to be even more of a massive force multiplier than it already is, we have to lower the cost of that intelligence, that output, which is why we're doing what we're doing. We want to ultimately lower the cost so that if we get to that nirvana state, which I hope is where we're going, we get there as quickly as possible and again, democratized as widely accessible as possible. Right?
Yeah. And I love the way you explain that rather than saying just the democratization of compute power, which is which is what the platform is. You said it's the democratization of intelligence across everybody in the world. And I think that's very powerful and very transformative as well.
And for what it's worth, we're spearheading a movement called Democratize Intelligence. It's abbreviated DEMI. And so it's demi.so for those that are
Okay.
interested. And we get together periodically, and we love anyone that believes in that concept to join us.
That's awesome. So, hey, this has been amazing. What a deep dive into AI. Um, I always end the pod, Simeon, with the same question because it is the Venture to Victory pod. That idea of course, funding in an exit, but also that idea of stepping out and doing something that's out of your comfort zone to achieve a big result. And so, I always ask this question, which is, what does it mean to you, whether in business, family, or life in general, to be victorious?
So I'll give you the facetious answer, which is for me, selfishly, to be victorious means to not be bored.
Mm,
Boredom is what really drives me crazy. But to be more specific, I'll go through each of those three. So in business, to me, what victory looks like is very specifically, 51% or more of global compute is transacted through the compute exchange. Um, that's 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 our North Star, and it also means that we've successfully democratized access to compute, and by doing so, accelerated the pace at which we reach hopefully that nirvana state. To me, that's victory on the business side. On the family side, it's being a great husband and soon to be father, and to make sure that I'm
Congratulations.
present. Thank you. Present, committed to my family, and then in life that I remember that I'm just one person. I'm human. We're all human, and that we need more kindness in the world, less division, more kindness. And so I hope I bring it.
Well, I think you will. I think, as someone who has 4 children, I think, being a father or parent, it's very humbling no matter how hard you try, and so I do think your heart softens in many, many ways, particularly if you have girls, not always, but for sure. But those are, what a wonderful way to answer the question, and I would say, yeah, that's very much, um, what I would consider victorious too, bringing more kindness, thoughtfulness, and easing that burden of pain that's in the world. And I think technology has an ability to do that. And it's a two-sided coin, of course. We don't know which direction it's going to go. And as you said, there is a percentage probability of something wonderful and a small percentage of things not so great. But a little bit of prayers. I still believe in prayers in this AI world, and I'm going to certainly keep continuing that whoever's developing this is developing it with good intentions, and that people with open hearts and strong, intelligent minds can control this so it betters the world that we're moving into. So
Well, I agree, and at least for the people that I know in these frontier labs, that they are doing it with the right intentions. I, and so I really hope we're all successful in doing this together. And I hope I can come back.
we can
And when we're at 51% and we have little bells for the team and ring the bell.
So, okay, so if anyone wants to reach out and help you get to that 51%, what's the best way? We know it's compute.exchange to check out the company. Is LinkedIn approach? Is there an email? What's the best way to reach out to you if you've got a potential deal, funding, partnership, whatever's going to help you get to that number?
Um, I think there's something to be said about founder-led companies, so they can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, or my email is
Awesome.
just my first name, Simeon, Simeon at tcex.com. And I'll say here, since we're talking about it, TCX was our original name, the Compute Exchange, and some great folks in marketing said some people might pronounce that a certain way, and let's go with Compute Exchange. So here we go. But now it's documented for all that we used to be called TCX.
I love that. Well, listen, it's been really great having you on the show. I learned a lot as I always do. I don't think there's anybody that really understands everything about AI. And certainly for most people that are out there that are laymen, just trying to catch up with this blistering speed at which it's moving. It's so nice to talk to people like you who have been in it for many, many years and who are on the forefront of some of the changes that are happening, in this year. So thank you so much for joining the podcast. Pleasure
Thank
having
you
you.
for the chance. Thank you for the opportunity, and I really do appreciate it because what we're doing is trying to bring transparency, and so that you don't have to be here at GTC to actually know what's happening. That it's actually it flows so easily, and so thank you for the opportunity to do that.
That's awesome. And that's it for the show today. It's a wrap. Cheers, everybody.
The Venture to Victory podcast is provided by MatchStar Venture Search. If you're interested in any of our open executive roles or need help sourcing world-class talent for your company, check out our website at matchstar.com.